MuvMinterz, it is your girl Genty, and I am in Studio B doing this week's historic MuvMinterz. This week we will be going into a little bit of a deep dive on Josephine Baker. So who is Josephine Baker, you may ask? Well, she was a well-known dancer in the 20s during the, the great boom in artistry of the 1920s, and she did a lot of work actually during World War II. So we're just gonna hop right on into it, and these are the top 5 amazing facts about Josephine Baker. So who is Josephine Baker? So Josephine Baker, was her original name was Frida Josephine McDonald, and she was born on June 3rd, 1906. She was born in Missouri, and she lived there up to she was about, I think, if I'm not mistaken, she was there till she was about 19 years old. Well, she lived in the States until she was about 19 years old, and then she kind of migrated to France, where a lot of her work, all the way up to her death, had occurred. She actually lived in France from the time she was 19 all the way up to her death. So let's jump into our second fact, actually. So her family life. So Josephine Baker had a pretty interesting life. She was actually adopted when she was an infant, and she pretty much was raised in Arkansas. Even though she was born in Missouri, she was raised in Arkansas, and then she migrated up to New York to do some dancing. However, a lot of her dance, she was kind of being pushed to the sidelines because she was black, I guess, pretty much. Because saying African American back in those days, it was even frowned upon back in those days. But she was being kind of shunned to the back, to the sidelines. So that's one of the reasons why she migrated to France. And also during this time, she got married quite a few times. Her first marriage, she was only 13. I think if I'm not mistaken, she got divorced the same year. Then she got married again when she was 15, and this one was the one, Mr. Baker was the last name that she took for the majority of her life. But she divorced him right before she moved to France. So right around 19 years old, she divorced him and moved on over to France. She got married 2 more times after that. The 3rd time when she was 31, and then the 4th time when she was 41, and then divorced. Usually her marriages were like really short. They're like 3 or 4 years long. But she did have a partner towards the end of her life, which, if I'm not mistaken, was Robert Brandy. Yes, Robert Brandy was her partner towards the end of her life, and actually that was probably her longest relationship too. She had 12 adopted children. She couldn't carry children, apparently. There was not much information on why, but she wanted what's called a rainbow tribe, so she wanted to adopt a child from all across the world. So that's kind of what she did in essence. So that would be our second fact, and then now we're gonna go into our third fact. So what was Josephine Baker's career? Then what did she do? Well, if you didn't know, she actually was a dancer, and she was an entertainer. That was kind of the broadening of what she did. She danced, she sang. A good chunk of her career was in dancing. She actually at one point was one of the highest paid entertainers in France, which was a huge deal during this time. Mind you, this is like the 20s and 30s, where somebody of a darker complexion being awarded this amount of money to be an entertainer was very much a big deal. But it looks to be that, her race wasn't really much of an issue. It was more of her talents. Even though there was still a lot of issues with some of her dancing. One of the big dancers is the banana dance that she did. A lot of people nowadays kind of say that, those are kind of kind of drawing stereotypes to the culture of Africans, and it was kind of frowned upon, especially now with political correctness and things of that nature. But during those times, those were the dances that she performed. And actually, if you look at it, I'm actually gonna put a clip of one of the dances here. Kind of reminds me of very early twerking. So be that as it may, a lot of those dances are still being done to this day, just in a different format. Just saying. So, but that's just a broadening of it. I would love to have put her music, but due to YouTube, no offense, YouTube, please. But yeah, I can't put her music here. However, I will put a link to a couple of her songs, and also I'm gonna try to add little clips here and there of her dancing. Because believe it or not, you can watch some of her dancing on YouTube. That's kind of shocking to me, which when I did this, I was like, wait, I could see her dance. There was an interview too, which we'll go into that in a sec. But yeah, you can actually watch this lady in action, and it's kind of shocking to see somebody who was from the 20s and a record of what they did is still out there, you know, on the internet, and you can actually see it. And it kind of brings the person to life, not just looking at them as somebody from the past, but you know, like an actual person who you can actually still see and hear their voice. So but I also mentioned that she was in the military, so that's going to jump into our fourth fact. Josephine Baker was actually a spy for the French Resistance. So what type of deal is this? Well, during World War II, there was a lot of spy work to kind of figure out what was going on with Germany and also with other political parties. So because Josephine Baker had an in, technically, due to her being an entertainer, she gave her work to be able to help the French Resistance, and with that she was able to do some spy work. It was actually pretty interesting on how she did it. She actually was able to get information and kind of like incorporate that information and send it back through her music notes and things of that nature, and like the code breaking it was very fascinating on how she did it. And nobody suspected her because she was Josephine Baker. And what was kind of interesting, she didn't need to pretend to be anybody else. Like, you know how most they see spy movies and they have to be an alternative person? She didn't, because nobody would assume that she would be a spy because it was Josephine Baker. And she kind of had it in with the elite because of her entertainer skills. So, and recently I will put a clip of the award ceremony of when she had been awarded for her work and contribution for the French Resistance. Oh, and also, by the way, during this period of time, she became a French nationalist, which means she pledged her allegiance to France. I know that sounds like a big deal. It probably is a big deal, but she aligned herself with France, which allowed her to be in the military. So that's why she was able to do that. Because I know some people probably be like, well, why she didn't do it for the US? Well, because she was in France and she wanted to do all her work in France. So that's why that occurred. There's also some speculation she did not like the US, which during this period of time, you also got to realize this is like 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, you know, so it was not a great time to be an African American in those days. Actually, any minority in those days, if you really think about it. So just saying. So then that kind of leads us into our fifth fact. So Josephine Baker, before she had passed, so she had passed on April 12, 1975. So we're gonna like wind it back before the day that she passed. And she actually probably about a couple days before she passed, her debut of a play that she was a part of, which was called, I want to make sure I say it right, Josephine Baker, which is pretty much a play about her, and it was rave reviews. Apparently this thing was phenomenal. A lot of people enjoyed it. You know, a lot of people wrote about it. They said it was great, wonderful. Literally 4 days later, afterwards, she went into a coma. And a lot of people said that she kind of went peacefully, like she was in a coma but she was surrounded by like articles and things of that nature of the performance and how wonderful the performance was. And like I said, and then eventually she had passed away on April 12th, 1975. Even though, you know, she passed away, if I'm not mistaken, she was only 68 years old, still relatively young, but she did a lot in her time on this earth, you know. And also towards the end, she also became a Catholic, which apparently she wasn't in the beginning. She became Catholic towards the end. Like different speculations on when this occurred, but they said that she gained faith over the years, especially towards the end of her years. And that's also something that she also mentions in one of her later interviews. And I'll also put a clip, not a clip, I would love to put a clip, but I don't want CNN to flag us, so I'll put a link if you guys want to see it down below, because I think that interview is actually kind of interesting, because you see her in her later years. She had to be like 65 in the interview, and you do see a kind of a different perspective of who she is. Even though she did a lot in her lifetime, you could tell she has no regrets on what she had done throughout her years, which is kind of amazing if you really think about it. She had done a lot in her, like, you know, she upped and moved to France at 19, started a career. Before that, she was married twice, you know, and she started a career that spanned decades, you know, and then she had like 12 adopted kids. You know, she was kind of living the life, like, you know, and she gave back for a good cause, if you really think about it, because that actually helped kind of slow down and stop a lot of the things that was going on with Germany during World War II, which I didn't realize had a big, you know, like the information she gathered. It's like stuff that you don't really realize, like, you know, plays a part in how our history has been like shaped and the people that played those parts. So those are the top 5 amazing facts about Josephine Baker. I highly recommend taking a look at a couple of like her documentaries and also some of her books. The one I read, it was literally called Josephine Baker, and there was another one I can't think of the book. I'll put it in the description, because that was one of the books that I used to do this. I think it was Josephine Baker, the Entertainer, the Spy, and there was something else to it, but I'll find it and I'll put it in the description box below, because I definitely highly recommend people to go get some more information about her. She was a wonderful human being, not without her own faults, because she had some faults, she had some issues, but you know, don't we all? But at the end of the day, she was able to do what she needed to do on this earth, and she was able to go home. Just saying. So anyway, so that is it for me. Hopefully I didn't bore you to tears. So as always, you guys, stay tuned, stay alert, and remember, you guys are the movement. You guys take care. Have a good one.